Welcome to the Spool podcast. Unwind with Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Thank you so much for joining us, Laura. We're excited to have Laura Kim here with us today. She's assistant professor at the University of Texas in the Bass School. She's many things. She's a performance artist, an incredibly smart writer, an artist in her own right. But I think she's also a kind of really interesting person. Let's think about who you are maybe first, because that allows us maybe to unpack a little bit about what you're doing. On your website, you have, not like normal people, quote unquote, a portrait, but you have three of them, right? And the first one is kind of a curious one. It's you in the spaceship uniform.
Yeah. Oh, profile photos.
Yeah,
yes.
profile
One
photos.
is from a project called Pigeonology. It was in collaboration with Professor Kevin Sweet here.
That's right.
And I was embarking on a journey into space.
As one does,
go spaceship to be able to kind of investigate who pigeons are and kind of the life of them and figuring
Please
out.
look at her website, because there she is in full gear, right? Waving as if she were about to take off, and then on her shoulder there's this little pigeon just peeping up. But that's only one of them. Then underneath it is photo number 2.
Which is, there's a lot of photos, so I'm trying to figure out. There's one of me as a PDF file,
Right.
which you click and you're able to see my CV bio. And
There's really, she's right, there's a lot. And, I just had the good fortune of looking at it this morning. You don't have it all memorized. But the point that I'm trying to get at, when you look at this, you start to understand two things very quickly about you, or I think, hopefully I get this right, that identity is something that we perform, and that identity is not something that is rigid or fixed, but you're inhabiting different versions of yourself, so to speak, in each one of these roles that you take on. Would that be a fair way of characterizing some of your ideas of performance?
Absolutely. Whether it is performing with yourself, performing for others, performing in collaboration with, society, culture, history, or even with nature, even this room with you talking, collaborating on ideas, whatever my environment is and surrounding. I'm kind of like a sponge. I like to observe and attend to a lot of things around me without any assumption or not taking anything for granted. So for me, kind of building an identity is also deconstructing an identity and also leaving it very porous and fluid, so that I'm always kind of relearning or unlearning to be able to see things differently.
But the kind of little magician trick, so to speak, that you're doing is you're bringing the viewer into this, right? Because the viewer will say, no, she's not really, going into space, and what's the pigeon doing on her shoulder anyway, right? So in other words, there's this kind of moment where you're like, think you know what you're looking at, and then you're like, as a viewer, and then you think, no, this somehow doesn't quite add up. So this kind of disorienting aspect, that's something that you do very...
Absurdity and a lot of humor.
But you do it with humor, but very intentionally, right? You want to kind of unsettle our habits of viewing, maybe? Is that a way of putting it?
And also with languaging is what I like to say.
I had big notes on this one, because there's around the various creative projects that you have, you create your own verbiage, so to speak, right?
Yes.
Blobbers is one of them, but the one where, I think that we can go back to the pigeon, but the one where you say like verbiage that I'm thinking of, philosophy, right? Can you, so it's like feel, like in feeling, but it almost sounds like the word that we know, philosophy, but it isn't. It is philosophy. You want to say something about that?
So philosophy came from a broader project, or maybe more of an umbrella idea called the Living Lab. So understanding the body as a laboratory, primary instrument and tool for experiencing the world around us, whether it's emotion as a feeling, or whether it is just immediate interaction with the surroundings and something that's sensorial and visceral. I wanted to use kind of forefront how we create these philosophies in the everyday by immediate interaction and experience with our immediate.
But let's scroll back, like, it's really, if I got this right, so, often when we think about the world at a university, then we have here the humanistic scholars, then we have here the scientists, then we have here the artists. But you just talked about, using your body in these moments as a lab and as a kind of space of exploring and experiencing. That means you use language that, is otherwise more often associated, quote unquote, with science, but you're moving it to performance and artistic expression and creativity. Is that, again, something that you're doing deliberately to kind of alert us that there's more at stake here than just pretty pictures or a nice performance?
Yep, absolutely. It's always trying to, I think the role of an artist is to, and also the permission in many ways, is to be able to occupy different spaces. And so whether if it's working with scientists or technologists, computer science engineers, how those in the field understand and create methods are very specific. And the language that I bring in as an artist is to be able to kind of dismantle it, see what's underneath, and reveal something that maybe may not be addressed. And so as an outsider, that kind of, as an artist going through these different fields, it's also kind of demystifying or reimagining what it could be, but also bringing that to the arts so that we can also talk about it from a more like post-disciplinary perspective. But
that means also that in a way you're deliberately trying to reclaim the idea of science or knowledge production for the arts as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That what you and with Kevin or others you're doing is as much adding to, quote unquote, our knowledge as whatever they do in their little white dresses in their labs when they're mixing things and say, ooh, it exploded or something like that, right?
Yes.
So you're a scientist, in other words.
I could be a scientist, I could be an engineer, I could be a technologist. I guess it would be a great time to kind of introduce example projects.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Because I think there's your ideas, the kind of performative element, and then there's the other part, you kind of indirectly talked about it, environment or technology. So I think a lot of your projects actually converge on this overlapping of your performance art with some element of technology, right?
Absolutely.
You want to talk about one of your projects?
Yes. So in that note, I'm really interested in human, non-human, more than human interaction, and especially when it comes to technology, how there's a tendency to make us more disembodied, fragmented, kind of lose a sense of self. And so for me, I'm really interested in kind of bringing that to the forefront through ways of how we live and perform through, and also, so I'll just give you an example.
Yeah.
So synthetic, empathic, intelligent companion artifacts,
just a
human
few
interaction
little words
labs.
put together, snappy.
It was a persona performance of 13 individuals, versions of myself. And I was the founding director of this virtual tech startup that was very much interested in creating social robots, or at least a concept of a social robot. And so I was remixing a lot of language that I was seeing out in computer science or engineering, robotics, and pulling that to create a world in which there's various operating researchers and personas that were creating and researching and following a very loose methodology of what those in the field are using. And the exciting part of that project was not just it being contained in the arts, but I would assume the persona of a founding director of this virtual organization, and I would go out to meetups and meeting other CEOs. I had a business card and a presentation and a deck ready, and would go out and say, hey, I am Laura. I'm the founder of Synthetic, Empathic, Intelligent Human Companion Artifacts, Seika Human Interaction Labs. And then I could initiate, that's kind of the field work. I'll be able to create this bridging the imaginary with real world, and then feeding that back into the arts. And so even though I'm not an engineer who understands the very detailed processes in the real world like applications, for me, I was able to still contribute in the way through storytelling, imagination, to reveal how is all these technology that's advancing and developing and have real world impact, how can we reveal what that looks like underneath by twisting it just slightly a little bit.
So, you started out with how did this go, our fragmented selves, right? This was the fluidity of our identities. So there's a lot of talk about how our identities are shaped or not by the ways by which we fashion ourselves or performing ourselves now in technology, in social media. How does that matter to the work that you do? And how is technology now in particular? I think I watched one of your videos, was it called Edge or something like that? Where
Sky's Edge?
Yeah, that's right. Where I think the whole idea of technology and the self and where the boundaries are respectively of either one are really unclear at some point, right?
I've kind of tried to move away from talking about the binary between digital and analog, which I do a lot with my students as well, because we are already part of the augmentation, an extension, and have so many aliases. You have a social media handle, you have your email, you have your text messages. There's all these different ways of how we communicate or how we can perform with the technology. And that changes the relationship with others, but also with the self. And also with how, as like a kind of a culture of how it's becoming more and more performative. And with TikTok or Instagram, everybody's performing, even for a family photo. Once it's online, it's going to be for an audience.
But that's an interesting part. I mean, you mentioned family photos. You're mentioning, the thing, technology, photography that obviously has existed for far longer. So let me just pick this up a little bit. So this performative element has always existed in family photographs. I mean, I have endless amounts of photos of my kids. And the funny thing is, at some point, they learn how to smile in those photos. And here the parents come again for the official photo of the four, right? And so then they're all standing their own. So there's a real clear performative element to it. And there's probably agony in this as well for them. But I think also at the same time, it's very clear that then those photos become circulated on social media, we print them, they're on the wall. So whatever performative element they had, they kind of become, of sorts, the ones that they pretend to be in those photos. So in that, in a way, what I'm trying to get at has always been the case with family photography. So what is so new or different about this type of technology that we're seeing right now, that it seems, is it more challenging, more fragmenting us, or is it more empowering and allowing us to be the space astronaut with the pigeon on the shoulder, or whoever we want to be?
It's a double-edged sword.
Okay.
I would say there is, you can share very intimate moments. And with, for instance, when I was born in the States, my grandparents were in Korea. So I learned how to perform for the camcorder that my dad had on my face. And we would ship the VHS tapes that I was in, showing this is a drawing that I did. Laura's doing ballet now. And then we shipped that over. So it's a physical media that was which takes time to go overseas all the way to Korea. And now it's more immediate.
By the time it got there, you already had learned how to play piano.
Exactly. And now the next video happens. But there's that lag and the real-timeness. There was a lag in time and space. And
so you're going for time-space compression? Is that where you're walking us
a little bit.
No, that's, I mean, it's all short-circuited in a way, right? At this point, compressed. The photo, the release, the consumption, it's all one, right? There's not any long... You're talking about all the technology, all the photography, you had to used to have to bring, the little thing to the developer, and then you would pick up your photos.
Yeah, that was also another ritual.
Yeah, another ritual. So time, space compression, acceleration, so this happens quick.
Yes, so there's that aspect that also on the other side, of how that time-space experience on through these platforms, it's that it's not neutral.
What do you mean by that?
There are, there's always a company or developers or those who are creating these specific experiences for us. And so what photos get popular, what videos that you put out become viral, and or how is it censored? Who is censoring it? And so there's also that aside of social media or these technologies that we're using that are being controlled and manipulated, and oftentimes made very easy and user-friendly and convenient, so that as those who are approaching the platform don't really know what's going on. So there's so I think there's that kind of duality that it just requires caution and understanding to be able to engage with those platforms critically. And that also changes the way we relate to ourselves and with others.
But there's something also just about sheer volume. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was visiting Germany. I was visiting my mom, as one does, as, a good son. And, in her apartment, I walk around. She has half a dozen photos and nice frames. And they're like one, when I was 4, the other one that I was 8. And there's not much more. I mean, she has a little box maybe in the basement where, we could alternate and could say, okay, there's when I was 4, maybe 5. But it's not, you ask me, do not ever do that. Can you show me some photos of my kids? I say, well, which of the 10,000 would you like, right? So there's the extent to which these photos can furnish a particular sense of my past, right? It's fairly stable because there's a fixed amount and they are located in very specific place. My mom is not messing them up. Like every time I visit, they're in the same places. So they can furnish her, and power certain set of ideas or memories for her and for me or something like that. But the extent to which with all the perfect camera angles, there's almost a surplus that is impossible for us these days actually to absorb in that way any longer, right?
Right.
So family photography, it's like, it is short circuit, it's time compression, but it's at the same time, it's out, right? So it's not, doesn't have that lasting, unless you create now memories of yourself of sorts.
Really upload it to the cloud.
And then, oh, you did that so well. Look at you. The cloud, there it is. All right, okay.
And that's also language. Why do we call it the cloud?
The cloud,
immediately your body goes up and you're looking to the sky.
Yeah, no, it's got to be up there. But it's interesting, and then we'll leave the technology and change maybe a little bit behind. But the idea that, photography in the 19th century, was often juxtaposed and contrasted with art, because it was seen often as a kind of very authentic form of documenting, far more authentic than art was. But then by the 1920s, there's an ongoing conversation about how photography is actually quite alienating, and it's actually capturing something that goes far beyond what we are personally experiencing, because we are looking at it from a different perspective, because the cameras record details that we ourselves don't see. So there's an ongoing conversation. That's what I'm trying to get at. The extent to which technology, captures our quote unquote authentic selves, and the extent to which it becomes actually a very alienating, fragmenting experience as well. So I find that interesting that the conversation about that is almost as old as technology itself.
Yes, absolutely. And now with AI, generated images, and we're still trying, it's still an uncertain territory, but we are already in it. And so the way we can only, I think, contextualize or think about it is revisiting those older technologies and transformations that society and culture has gone through. And so that's where we're at, but we can only know so much as humans living in the current moment.
Let's go back to your, what was it called? Sky Edge, right?
Sky's Edge.
Sky's Edge, I'm close, okay. Describe to us what's going on there. There's a kind of rectangular space with whatever 4 walls. There's you, and then there's all kinds of bunch of things on the walls.
So that video it's part of a broader series. Previous video before that was called Blink, which is where I try to actively use AI to regenerate some movements that I did and blend more different types of technologies, AI technologies, generative technologies. And then for Sky's Edge, around that time, which was last year, there was a lot of conversation on spatial computing or even the spatialization of digital space. And I was interested in trying to create a three-dimensional space within a flat surface video. So the screen that we experience is pretty glossy, but how do we create something within that space that looks very theatrical and where a protagonist is moving through and blends in with another screen within the screen. So it's very kind of this meta of breaking through screens, moving through spaces, and speaking of time, space, merging place as well. And
but
so
it's also the inside and outside gets all
absolutely.
messed up.
And then the person, like the protagonist, shows up outside of the box,
exactly.
and so all of that also is through AI-generated images that were based on the lyrics. That was part Korean, part English, and mixing both, inspired by Korean old travelogue.
Right. So you said just a moment ago that you left behind that binary language, the analog, the digital. You're blurring the lines of quote unquote inside and outside. But I think another way of how you go at it as well is dreams, right? So, dreams, is a maybe more traditional way, even before all this technology existed, where the things that are there and that not there have always been blurry. But I think an interesting development is now that the ways by which technology allows us to be is also then again in the ways in which potentially we dream of ourselves, right? So that those things are kind of becoming uncannily interconnected at some point, right?
Very, you see dreams, very, my process is already very associative. And I've always kind of leaned into my dreams or dream inspired images. But also in many ways, I do feel like there's a lot of blurring. We're kind of in this constant dream space, whether, even if you're here present, you're kind of virtually wandering somewhere else. Maybe like, I have to check this email. I have to answer this.
Never. There are so many other good thoughts. But this is a little bit the key point, I guess, of your installation. That's why I'm kind of pointing into that direction.
It's right
roughly,
there.
That you have in the UTD museum space is immersive environment. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's at the Krohn Museum of Asian Art at the new Athenaeum building, the multimedia gallery space. It's the kind of inaugural exhibition within that specific gallery. And it's a project called Kinmakers, Hidden Songs in Our Mother's Dreams. And it is a multi-channel installation, and there's blobby chairs so viewers can interact.
Blobby chairs.
Very blobby, and you can sit like this and relax and move the blobby chairs around to whichever orientation you would like to. And there's also a sculpture in the middle that has a projection with poetic text, which my collaborator Surabhi Saraf and called a song. And it's considered a portal in which that's kind of central to this specific iteration of the installation. And so it's part of a broader practice, which my collaborator and I call it, called kinmaking. And so kinmaking is a practice. So it's not just a one-time only exhibition, right. And this specific exhibition is a opening chapter to this ongoing exploration. And kinmaking centers the body through this process called quantum listening. And it is inspired by composer and artist musician Pauline Oliveros, who coined the term quantum listening. And so it's a way of deep listening through your whole body. Not just through your ears, but it is going beyond, deeper into the subconscious dream state, and also across time, across generation and space. And so the piece was really trying to think about what happens when we listen so deeply that you start accessing parts of the desires and dreams that maybe your mother's had or your mother's had. And so it's a way of reconnecting not to our personal bodies and to each other in this very fragmented and disembodied time, but across and beyond.
Which is a great installation. But one of the kind of fun parts, that actually lots of individuals have commented on are these blobber seats of sorts, because they are almost traps of sorts, because you're like so comfy in there that whether you had intended to submit yourself to the experience or not, once you're in those chairs, you are in there, and I think then you're like slowly opening yourself up for all of this. But it's really then, perfect example of what we just talked about, where what one listens to and what quote unquote you see inside of you, it's just on the screens and in your internal eyes, so to speak, it all kind of becomes one, right?
Right. And that's, again, goes back to the Blobby identity.
To the Blobby identity.
It's very Blobby talk, but...
Yeah, exactly. We always like to give our listeners some cool new words to write down. Blobby, think about your Blobby identity, right?
Right. And blobs have become a very centering idea, concept, principle, way of me moving through the world in many ways. And it's partially because of being Korean American. You asked me about my bio, but I always like to say I'm a Laura, I'm a Hyunji, I'm a Kim, I'm a Korean American, I am a woman, I am a species, I am a human earthling, and also maybe perhaps an alien.
Who knows, right? Who knows? But it's also, but the many you, in other words, relate also to the many practices, right? Because I've seen you now, or we just talked about those video installations, the immersive spaces, dance performances. You were in a theater performance, so you're a singer, a dancer, an art installer. I mean, you hit all the different arts forms almost, right? So that's, I think, I think that's also the interesting part to all of this, that each one of these serve a different project, a different science experience, and a different quote unquote Laura. However, you kind of envision yourself. What are you doing now? I mean, now that are you at home sometimes stuck in your blubber seats and then you can't get out? Or
that's a big part of my process. I always like to say the artist's labor is 24/7, 365 days, because you're always, even if I look like I'm not doing anything, I'm scrolling online, I'm always thinking of something. And that may not, immediately pop up in one piece, but I like to always say that it's always a work in progress. So every piece, every performance, every exhibition is one that leads to the other. It's almost like a word or a sentence. And I have to wait 5 years to understand what that all meant and how that's stitched. And so right now what I'm working on living and breathing and playing. And right now I'm also preparing for a performance on Saturday. Here, it's a closing performance for Hidden Songs in Our Mother's Dreams, and it will be around 45-minute performance. And we are inviting one current graduate student in ATEC and a UTD alumni, Kristen Duong and Zach Nguyen. And so they are our new Kinmakers that are joining the space, and the performance is focused on if the first opening performance was more about showing me and Surabhi Suraf's kind of collaboration as opening the space, now we're inviting two other Kinmakers to as a way of teaching this practice. And then so the performance on Saturday will be about, it's a participatory performance. So those who are entering the space will be
They're going to be in it, and so
they'll be in it.
Make sure that you're ready for it, whatever comes once you're in that space.
And
I think that's a really good way to finish. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think there's so much excitement and opportunity engaging with any of your projects. Go also to our website. There's a ton of all of your projects. You do a really good job in documenting things that you're doing. So instead of scrolling through the shopping channels or whatever else you're doing, you can spend endless hours on your website and then watch the videos, get lost in space, think about your fragmented identity, your philosophy, or indeed your blobbing, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.